Hey Squishies, back again with another vlog. This is Gravity Falls Season 2, Episode 20, Weirdmageddon Part 3, Take Back the Falls. The grand finale. Wow. That was a really good, solid, satisfying ending to the show. That really... they pulled out all the stops and they really crafted an ending that strengthens the show in hindsight. It's actually been quite a while since I watched it. Because it had been so long since I started the series. I decided to go back and watch a few key episodes and scenes. I ended up rewatching the finale a couple of times. All told, it's been almost a week since I recorded the first two parts of the vlog, the first two parts of the finale, and first watched the third part. And I hardly even know where to start. I've talked a lot in talking about this show. I've talked a lot about paranoid viewing. I've talked a lot about, the puzzles and ciphers it presents and how, in a way, they're... I wouldn't say they detract or distract from what the show is, but they're tangential to what the show is. The show would still be what it is without them. And the obvious point of comparison here, because it's a point that people keep making and one that the show makes itself by, casting Kyle MacLachlan as the bus driver at the end of the finale. Apparently, the first choice to voice Bill was David Lynch, and Alex Hirsch only did it after Lynch didn't. It's Twin Peaks, and that I've mentioned that before. I mean, the Oregon location, the general weirdness of it all, the idea of a town that's surface level normal but has dark secrets. Those are all very Twin Peaks. But it's very not Twin Peaks as well. The paranoid viewing as, a key element of fandom is not... It's not always been there. Some fandoms, like mystery fandom, going all the way back to Sherlock Holmes, which has a strong case for being the original fandom, the very first one. Sherlock Holmes was a little bit of that. There was a lot of, fans debating and discussing minute details and trying to construct timelines and all that kind of stuff. The general nonsense fans get up to. But it didn't become, the standard approach of fandom until the growth of online fandom, because that sort of thing kind of has to be crowdsourced, and crowdsourcing is hard when it's, the 19th century and you're trying to do it by writing letters back and forth. Or if it's the 1950s and you're using fanzines. It's really not until the internet comes along, and in fact, Henry Jenkins, who's one of the founders of the field of fan studies, which is exactly what it sounds like. It's the academic study of fandom. He positions it at the beginning of the 90s, with the growth of Usenet, early precursor to the web. He uses Twin Peaks fandom as, his model. He presents Twin Peaks online Usenet fandom, the communities that grew up around that, as the model of how what we think of as fandom today, inextricable from the internet and inextricable from paranoid viewing, comes from there. And it's what Twin Peaks fans would do, is they would go on Usenet and they would pore over tiny details of the show and look for clues to what was going to happen. And inevitably, simply because, monkeys on typewriters, some of their theories would be correct. The thing is, paranoid viewing doesn't work on a show like Twin Peaks. This is even more obvious with the third season, which has been coming out now. As I record this, it's just had its 16th episode, I believe, of the third season. They don't set up plot twists. Because that's not how David Lynch works. David Lynch will rewrite the script in the middle of filming. He's kind of notorious for this. He's known for being, really warm and friendly and great to work with, but also he will completely, his actors have no clue what's going on. And he will rewrite things on a whim. The villain of the first two seasons of Twin Peaks, the main villain, Bob, is the result of a filming error. A member of the crew's face is visible in a reflection in a scene in the first episode, and so they decided to make him the villain. That's how Lynch works. He looked kind of scary in that reflection, so they ran with it. He makes stuff up as he goes along, and it's brilliant, but not well suited to paranoid viewing. There is no conspiracy. You're not going to be able to figure out what's coming. You might successfully guess it. There's a difference between guessing and figuring out. It's not going to be because the clues were seeded. And Gravity Falls, by contrast, although I'm sure, because this is true of literally every television show that has ever been made, I'm sure there are elements of Gravity Falls that were worked out as they went along and as they developed it. In fact, I can guarantee it because I've seen the unaired pilot since the first time I watched the finale. And that doesn't even have the journal in it. There's a completely different book that Dipper gets the information about the undead and the gnomes from in the 12-minute version of the first episode. It's not a journal he finds. It's a book he already owns. So, Ford was not part of the original conception, is what that suggests. But that's how any creative project goes. Writing a TV series is like writing a novel and putting up one page for the whole public to see as you finish it. That's not how storytelling normally works. You normally conceive the whole story and then tell it. But with something serialized, you can't do that. Things will change, they will twist, they will morph, especially with the complexities and vagaries and reality of TV production. The network decides you can't do something you wanted to do. You're not able to get an actor you wanted. One of your actors quits. These things happen. And they alter the trajectory. So there's a lot more virtuosity and improvisation in creating a television series than I think most people appreciate. I think most people think of it as being something that's planned out meticulously in advance, and that's just not true. The fact that it holds together as well as it does is a testament to just how flexible and quick on your feet and good at improvisation you have to be to run a TV show. So, with Gravity Falls, all the clues and ciphers and things, those are deliberately part of the experience. I've seen interviews with Alex Hirsch where he talks about how he put those in because he liked them as a kid and he wanted some young kid to see them and be excited and amused and entertained by them. But no story can be about those things. And I think it's telling that two things. First of all, that Hirsch wanted to cast the villain as David Lynch, as like the visionary who created Twin Peaks and inspired so many television shows, including Gravity Falls, and so many others besides. Without Twin Peaks, there would not be an X-Files, a Lost, a Gravity Falls. So many shows owe so much to it. The Doctor Who reboot wouldn't have happened without X-Files, which wouldn't have happened without Gravity Falls. No, X-Files could have happened without Gravity Falls. It wouldn't have happened without Twin Peaks, excuse me. So, yeah, it's interesting that he wanted to cast David Lynch, and when he couldn't get him, he cast himself. Because he's Bill Cipher. He is the clues, the ciphers. He's the hints and the predictions and all those things. And so it makes sense that he couldn't be defeated by those things. So a word that gets thrown around a lot for shows like this is cult television. But I don't think they're as much like cult films. Especially not the very Twin Peaks inspired stuff. Twin Peaks itself in particular is more occult than anything else. And what I mean is that everything about Twin Peaks is layers of illusion and deception and hiding. And that's what the occult is. It's hidden. It's what the word literally means. To occultate something is to hide it away. It's secret knowledge, the hidden truths, the way things really work. You can see why it lends itself so well to paranoid viewing, even though ultimately it won't work, because if you can solve the mysteries, if you can figure it all out intellectually by piecing together evidence and putting together the pieces of the puzzle, then it ceases to be a cult. At that point, it's just knowledge. And that's why Twin Peaks continually defeats that. The other thing that's very telling about Twin Peaks is that it's about darkness. It is a very dark show. In particular, the third season is just visually incredibly dark. Like, they're very dim lighting throughout the whole thing. It's even like outdoor scenes in bright daylight are heavily shadowed, and indoor scenes are sometimes like almost indecipherable. But it's in more senses than that. The core idea of Twin Peaks really is that there is a darkness lurking under the superficially bright and happy. That this ordinary, peaceful Oregon town that seems like wholesome and all-American and that kind of stuff actually has all kinds of darkness and evil lurking within it. And that there's no bottom to that. The deeper you plunge into that, trying to explore its mysteries, all you find is more and more darkness the deeper you go. That's not Gravity Falls. Gravity Falls is in direct opposition to that. Gravity Falls finds joy and wonder in the bizarre, the mysterious, the abject. And that's actually, I think, a useful concept to bring into this show, the more I think about it, is the abject. Abjection. The abject is that which is and is not ourselves. It's closely related to the idea of the grotesque. The abject is the stuff that is an essential part of life, but which we necessarily must expel from ourselves. It's piss, shit, and vomit are like the standard eternal archetype of the abject. But metaphorically, it becomes everything that we, every part of life that is a natural part of life, and we just look at it and go, nope, go away. It's everything that we don't want to admit or deal with, that we respond to with revulsion because we don't want to accept it, but it is a part of who we are. And particularly stuff about bodies, like a lot of abjection mixed up with the way our culture responds to like LGBT folks. That's a natural part of the human experience, but our culture treats it literally like shit, as something disgusting that must be expelled or destroyed. And a lot of Gravity Falls is about embracing that kind of stuff when you really think about it, A lot of it is about the rejected, the outcast, the abjected, these grotesque creatures that turn out to be actually kind of cool or friendly or nice, that, whether that's the gnomes or, the multi-bear, Octavia the eight-legged cow. Probably the best example is Mabel, Candy, Wendy, and Greta in the episode The Unicorns. When they reject the idea of purity, because of course the pure is the opposite of the abject. When they reject that and are like, no, we don't need to carve away huge slices of who we are. We're sweaty, disgusting animals. Let's own it. And there's a beauty in that. And against that, you have the clean, cold lines. For all that Bill Cipher claims to be about making things weird and freeing people and that kind of thing, really he's just about destroying everything that doesn't conform to how he wants it to be. He is very rigid, as befits a triangle. And so that's what the conflict in the end comes down to, is the abject creatures of Gravity Falls and the rotting old mystery shack transformed into a robot made of garbage versus Bill and his henge demons. Because they're a different kind of grotesque. They're just, they're not the grotesque that's revolting precisely, that's abjected. They're just completely transgressive. They're ordinary things jammed together in strange ways. An eyeball with wings coming out of it. There is nothing in there that is abject. It's just things where they don't belong. A different kind of grotesque. I don't know if that makes any sense. But I think the fact that Bill himself is geometric is the key here. And yet Bill himself is grotesque too, like when all that meat is crawling over him or when his eye gets ripped out. in the end, everyone and everything is. And that's, again, going back to we're disgusting, sweaty animals. Embrace it. Which brings me to one of the things I really love in this episode. It's a little detail in the end credits. When all these different images are scrolling by, one of the things we see is a tree in which Mabel has carved, the classic, carving into a tree, heart with your name plus name of significant other. And I definitely saw Gabe, like Mabel and Gabe heart crossed out. There were two others crossed out that I think were Gideon and Mormondo. But could be wrong. One of them could be Norman instead. But the last heart, the only one not crossed out, was Mabel plus Mabel. Because one of the things that kept recurring with Mabel is, although Mabel does have like a healthy self-love, she sometimes forgets it when she's in boy crazy mode. She tries to become someone that she's not for Gabe, or suppresses her own distaste with Gideon. But she is who she is, and she loves who she is. And that's enough. There's all kinds of other love here. Like, there's just an enormous amount of love going around in this episode. And it's telling, I think, that the stuff that's been built up to by clues, the intellectual solutions, don't work. The secret weakness that's been hidden in the last frame of the opening credits of every single episode of the series doesn't actually work. And it doesn't work because it's built on bringing people together, which, of course, that's how you beat a cipher. You crowdsource it. That's how every cipher in the show has been defeated, is by bringing people together to figure it out online in the fandom. So, of course, build cipher you defeat by bringing a bunch of people together. But it doesn't work because those people can't get along. Specifically, the fight between Stan and Ford. And I don't know if this was deliberate a lot, because this is a very common mistake. But when Ford corrects Stan's grammar, Ford is wrong. Me and him versus him and me, they're both grammatically correct. Either one works. Him and me is polite, but it's not more correct. It's just more polite. You're supposed, it's just an etiquette thing. When you're talking about multiple people, including yourself, you put yourself last. But that's just like Ford. Ford is very pedantic, and like a lot of pedants, he gets stuff wrong. Which is why a fun game to play with people who are getting pedantic is to out-pedantry them. Somebody comes at you with, well, actually, a tomato is a fruit, not a vegetable. And you come back with, well, no, actually, it's both. Because botanically, it is a fruit. But culinarily, it is a vegetable. Classification which does not exist in botany. And therefore is not mutually exclusive with any botanical classification. And so on and so forth. No matter how pedantic somebody is being, you can always out-pedantic them. And usually, it confuses and enrages them. Which is what somebody who's being pedantic kind of deserves. Point stands, the bad blood between Stan and Ford is kind of mirroring the need for Mabel and Dipper to patch up about Dipper wanting to leave. Dipper ultimately decides not to, and so they're able to patch up relatively easily. But Stan and Ford have all these years of bad blood, and it tears the circle apart. But that means that the laid down clues aren't what beats Bill Cipher, because of course they're not. Again, he is Bill Cipher. He is Ciphers. He is the secret. He is the mystery lurking at the heart of everything. And that means that something else has to be done to defeat him. Something more creative. Something that comes not out of puzzles, but out of the characters. And out of their relationships between one another. And so you get the swap. And Stan sacrificing himself. At least briefly. Which is a gorgeous scene, and I love it. And yes, I know what Bill says there. I noticed he was speaking backwards. I went on YouTube and found somebody who had played the scene playing backwards. He spells out the word axolotl and then makes some kind of couplet. I forget the exact wording, but it's basically burning himself to resurrect himself. Invoking an ancient power, presumably the axolotl is the ancient power he's referring to. And I've seen a lot of people online, like in the brief checking around I did looking for this, talking about how the axolotl can regenerate. And yeah, that's true, and that's probably what they were going for, but there's another interesting possibility. Another read that you can do with it. Which is, axolotls are really important to the study of neoteny. They're one of the first instances of discovering total neoteny. Now, what neoteny is when an organism remains in a juvenile form even as it becomes an adult. So, for example, an axolotl is essentially still a tadpole even though it's an adult capable of reproducing. And it's because it is still in a juvenile form that it has those regenerative capabilities. It's basically full of stem cells. Because they're there for it to finish metamorphosizing, but it never does under normal conditions. Because in the case of axolotls, it's to do with iodine. The metamorphosis into an adult salamander requires a compound which requires iodine, and axolotls evolved to survive in an environment that doesn't have enough iodine to make the transformation. If you put them in the right conditions, they will actually metamorphose into something that looks very much like a tiger salamander, which is a close relative of axolotls. And this is, in fact, how it was discovered. I am 100% blanking on the researcher's name, but German researcher had axolotls shipped to him from Mexico. And when the box arrived, it had what appeared to be tiger salamanders in it. Turned out that packing the axolotls in wet dirt had given them the conditions necessary for them to become adult salamanders. What does any of this have to do with Gravity Falls? Well, what I was thinking about was, so trapping an axolotl in the right conditions will cause it not to regenerate, but to metamorphose, to become something else that is similar to it, but an adult form. So, that raises the question, what is the adult form of Bill? No idea. The wackiest thought I have that I don't know how well I could support is that it's Stan himself. Stan often wore that eye patch to only have one eye. Stan is obsessed with money, bills, and bill is based on the symbol on the back of the dollar bill. The Great Seal of the United States. He is very prone to rule breaking, obsessed with the weird, tries to create weird. Maybe that's why Stan's memories came back. Maybe Bill grew up and Stan came back. More likely, though, is just that being reminded of his old memories brought him back, because that's what happened with McGucket in the episode that introduced the memory gun. Seeing all his old memories caused him to begin recovering his memory. But it's just fun to think about. It's telling, too, I think, that it's really Mabel who restores his memories, that their connection, because in the same way that Ford and Dipper have this similarity, there's a lot of similarity between Mabel and Stan. They're the less book smart of their respective pairs. They're not by any means dumb. They're creative. They are eccentric. They have a bit of a business sense, as witnessed when Mabel temporarily ran the place. They're trying to hold on to everything while the other sibling is trying to move on. There's a lot of parallels between them, but Mabel and Dipper got it right on the first try. Stan and Ford, thanks to Mabel and Dipper basically, get a second chance. I love that they sail away together in the Stan War II. It's a very fitting end for those two characters. Passing Mystery Shack on to Seuss, very fitting end for him. I noticed that I think her name was Melody, the girl he kind of had the long distance relationship with in that one episode. Now seems to be working at the Mystery Shack, so I guess it's not a long distance relationship anymore. Yeah, a lot of good, satisfying stuff in this ending. It was a really good final episode. And it just feels right to be watching it very shortly after watching the pilot for DuckTales, because I know a lot of people went from working on one to working on the other, and you can tell. There's always been a lot of DuckTales in Gravity Falls. In particular, Stan is clearly based on Scrooge. And it's nice to see things happening the other way, like the degree to which Webby is a hybrid of Wendy, Dipper, and Mabel. Very clear to me after finishing Gravity Falls. I know a lot of people saying that she's just Mabel, but really I feel like she's more Dipper than anything else, and then some Wendy and Mabel mixed in. Yeah, I think that's probably everything I wanted to say. This was a great show. It was a real privilege to be able to watch it with all of you. And I'm very satisfied. See y'all next time. Schedule's a little up in the air right now. There's going to be some Dirty Pair and some commission videos in there. But the next series season is going to be Starverse Season 2. So I'm really looking forward to that. I will see you all next time. Bye!